Hello and welcome to a new lecture on social media. Today, first of all, I'm Professor Cyrus Satzes, and today we're going to talk about social media history. And just the concept of what networks are, what social media actually is, how it came to be in terms of what we have today. So I'm going to now go to the PowerPoint for today's lecture. And if you're a student of mine watching this, please make sure you obviously answer the discussion post questions that coincide with this. Yeah, let's get into social media history. So I should make sure I open it into a full screen. All right, here we go. So social media, the history of it, some definitions, some theories. So the first question is, did social media exist before the digital age? Meaning like before we actually even had electricity, does social media exist? Well, to a certain extent, yeah. I mean, we have cave paintings. We have really ancient drawings that represent communication dating back thousands of years. And in a lot of these drawings and a lot of these images that were painted by human beings thousands of years ago, they show social interactions. They show a lot of the images that are portrayed show human beings interacting with one another, depending on each other, working with each other, socializing with each other. And so social media and the social aspect of humanity as a whole has been around for actually a very long time. So the question comes about, well, what is a network exactly? Why do we call, when two people communicate through social media, social networking, for example? Well, networking can mean a lot of things. Railroads are an example of networking, right? I mean, networking helped create the entire passage of travel for this country to be formed and turn into what it is today, and to a greater angle. So is the world. So this is one way of networking, is actually creating something physically, using materials that eventually allow two people to connect and network. In this case, this is a physical concept, but it is a form of networking. Then there is interstate highways, right? This is more modern. After World War II, we developed this vast network that people can connect with each other through cars and connect physically, and where we can actually see each other, communicate interpersonally. And this also cultivated a car culture that migrates a desire to new destinations. Funny side note, most of our highways were created largely because the government was convinced by the military that highways were needed so that planes could land anywhere in the country. That is why the width of a highway is typically just enough for a plane to land on it. That is how, again, Congress was convinced to spend the exorbitant amount of money to build highways. So, funny side note. Then there's television, right? That's a form of networking where television connects a nation of people around shared cultural discourse. It homogenizes the codes that shape a narrative. Basically, when TVs came about, everyone was watching the same content for the most part. There's only a few channels, and that's where you get the phrase water cooler talk, because people would oftentimes watch what's TV, and then they'd network and connect based on the similar cultures that were consumed from the programming and communicated about it. And the difference between television and now, as you can see by this doctored image, very poorly so, is that oftentimes most people are now holding many different devices while also watching TV. You might have a laptop in front of you, you might have some sort of gaming device, you might have your mobile phone while you're watching TV. So a change has happened there. Then in terms of networks, you can look to, let's say, a channel like MTV, where niche consumer culture evolved. We have content with commercials, you have content as commercials. And this is the beginning of a subculture as a pop culture narrative distribution mechanism that started the erosion of distance. So the more technology evolved, we were able to network without physically having to communicate. And of course, this also obviously evolved to trends where trends move via networks, right? And networks help create messages that spread out. Networks help create trends, networks help define culture. So trends move via networks, and new networks erode distance. So this picture, for example, is someone who is in Asia, yet they're wearing a Yankees jacket, thousands of miles away. New networks erode distance. They accelerate the experience of time and reduce the significance of distance during a given historical moment. And then, of course, there is human networks, where networks are both interpersonal, both within ourselves. And this map and this diagram also can demonstrate in a lot of ways how messages are disseminated through networks, and oftentimes how things become viral. Oftentimes it's just one of these nodes can result in 1,000 nodes consuming that same information. So in this lecture, in this PowerPoint, there is a difference between a network and networking. When you're networking, this implies a relationship initiation, oftentimes between strangers, whereas the network is the platform for it. So when you think about network versus networking, always think of mass communication versus mass media. Mass communication is what is being disseminated to a large amount of people. Mass media is the how of it. And the same can apply for network versus networking. Whereas networks allow strangers to meet, but usually through a shared connection, networking is the act of meeting new people. And this question or these concepts should be familiarized. And then so some more definitions and terms. And again, this entire PowerPoint is based on one of my professors in graduate school who's been teaching a social media class for a long time. So social networking, again, is something you do. This is usually with friends of friends. Social network is a group of people who share common connections. And a social network site, an SNS, is a digital platform that lets you keep and make connections. So social network sites, by definition, these are web-based services that allow members to create a public or semi-public profile. Think of pretty much every modern-day social media network, like like your Twitters, your Facebooks, your TikToks, all that stuff. You can list a connection with other users. You can also view and traverse their list of connections and lists of other members as well. So think of Facebook as a prime example of that. So other characteristics of an SNS can include a profile photo, an age, location, interest, an ability to add applications, public comments, private messages. I don't know if there's many paid versions these days, but a lot of them expect you to spend money on various things. Some of them request friendship confirmations, others follows and follow backs. And obviously SNSs differentiate from each other through visibility and access settings. And here's an example of a page where you set those settings. And there's all other terms applied to social network sites, including friends, followers, contacts, fans, likes, etc. There's a definition of a parasocial interaction. This is part of the scholarly side of studying social network sites and social media. Is with parasocial interactions, the communication is usually one-sided, where one party knows much more about the other. Think about yourself following a high-profile individual, like a celebrity, like an artist, politician, athlete. And it does create an illusion of intimacy or bond. That is one of the interesting facets of social media. Gwen Stefani, great musician, example of that. If you're following her account, chances are she doesn't know much about you, but you know a lot about her. Here's a question for you. What was the first major social networking site? What started it all? Is it Facebook, MySpace, LiveJournal, or 6degrees.com? Just giving you a moment to think about that, because for those of you that remember MySpace, congrats. There's content even older than that. This bar here shows the launch date of major social networking sites, which was in 1997. 6degrees.com was formed. So D6degrees.com would be the correct answer. And this chart also proceeds to show you all the other different social network sites that came. A lot of them went. Like 6degrees.com, for example, was ahead of its time, started in 97 and closed in 2000. I personally remember Friendster. And then continuing on, there's Skyblog, Couchsurfing. In 2003, LinkedIn emerged. So they've been around for a very long time. MySpace came in 2003. They closed, I believe, in like 2007 or 2008. They were first purchased by News Corp, who owns Fox News. for $500 million. They eventually sold it to an investor group led by Justin Timberlake, who converted it to a music platform, and they purchased it for approximately $30 million. So News Corp took a $470 million hit on MySpace. And it continues on. Like YouTube came out in 2005. I mean, that's a huge one, right? Facebook also came out in 2005, another huge one. Twitter came out in 2006. So that's the early days of social media. User-generated content is a concept you should really be familiar with. In 2007, Time Magazine selected you as their person of the year. So they were the 2006 person of the year, but this issue came out in 2007. For the simple reason that individuals were now starting to create their own content. Citizen journalism was emerging during this time. So that's some history for you there. Now we'll cover motivations of mass versus social media use, which brings up the question, why do you watch TV? Well, it relieves boredom, right? You're entertained. You might relate emotionally to the content, whether it's a drama or a comedy. It's a platform to get information. It's a place where you can be socially informed. And some of you maybe don't watch TV, but when I say TV, just think about video platforms. So YouTube counts by today's standards. And anyways, these reasons are all part of what's called uses and gratifications of mass media, which is a concept which basically states that a goal-directed active audience uses the media to satisfy one of these needs. It could be cognitive, right? Maybe you're consuming media, and to a greater extent, social media, because you want information, you want to learn more. Maybe you're using it for an emotional context. Like maybe you're watching a drama and want to be emotionally invested, or you're just looking for a laugh and I want to watch a comedy. Maybe it's for personal reasons, right? To help boost your self-esteem with the content you're watching, or to help elevate your status in this world. There's obviously the social aspect of it, and that's where social media comes in especially, and that's where you want to have interactions and develop relationships and network. And there's also the escapism, right? And that's where you're consuming it to relieve tension. You just want to be entertained. Life is hard. You want an escape, and it helps cure boredom. And this is the 8 milestones timeline of social media history, and just human communication as a whole, actually. Somewhere in the 2,000 to 100,000 BC range, human beings developed the concept of talking in language. We don't know for sure when this is, because until writing emerged approximately 5,000 plus years ago, we really don't know for sure what's been going on in human history. We can only make guesses based on anthropological and anthropological research, archaeological research. That's what I was searching for. So anything beyond the earliest writing days of human history, when the Egyptians and the Sumerians started to write and communicate this way, we can only make guesses. So in terms of human beings developing a language to communicate with each other, we guess it was somewhere in 100,000 year range. And then beyond that, we eventually learned how to write. Printing emerged in 1500 AD. And that really exploded with Gutenberg's steam engine, Gutenberg's printing press, where he applied a steam engine to it. But printing first emerged in 1500, and you saw the emergence of books as a result of that. In the 1800s, you started to see photography and motion pictures. As 1900 got close, you started seeing telephones and telegraphs, along with radio and TV. Digital media came about in the mid 1900s. You technically make the argument that TV is a form of digital media. And then obviously close to the year 2000, you started seeing handheld wireless media. So these are considered to be the 8 milestones of human communication. And also, of course, atoms play a part in this in terms of, the technological affordances of communication. A long time ago, we'd oftentimes have to use big clunky ways of communicating, anything from letters, right? Which are obviously everything has a chemical breakdown to it that goes fundamentally to atoms. And these are big, slow, and expensive, whether you're traveling to talk to someone, you're writing a letter. Whereas now, we're using bits. These are smaller, using microchips and electric currents to send messages. It's very fast and it's very cheap. And this is an example of old school versus newer school days of how we used to listen to music, for example. That is called an 8-track player right there. Nicholas Negroponte did a lot of research on the evolution from atoms to bits in terms of communicating. And he wrote in 1995, it is irrevocable and unstoppable. And he was correct. This is an example of an old school rotary phone. I'm actually old enough to remember these things when I was a kid. Yes, you had to turn it all the way and then watch it go back for each number. It was pretty insane. And then obviously the emergence of mobile phones was huge, right? So Martin Cooper invented the mobile phone while working on Motorola in the 1970s. This went on the market in 1983. He made the first mobile call in 1973, where he called his competitor at Bell Labs. This video is comedy. I'll play this for you as well real quick during this lecture. This is a video from the Today Show, and I'm gonna have to do a new share here so that you see this video. Let me get to it real fast. All right, so this was the former Today Show when this was the very early days of the internet. Take a listen. Actually, I might need to reshare this because I don't know if I have the audio set up. There we go. Okay, so let's try this again. And now hopefully you will enjoy.
Back now at 56 past, I wasn't prepared to translate that as I was doing that little tease.
Oh, that's
that little
right.
mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At?
See, that's what I said. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it.
Around.
I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I heard be around big fight up in the lunchroom the other week.
There it is. Violence at NBC. GE com. I mean,
well, Allison should know.
What is internet anyway?
Internet is that
massive computer network.
The one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
Oh, Allison will be in the studio shortly.
What
does it mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of started from.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us what this was.
It's like a computer billboard.
It's not in there. It's a computer billboard, but it's nationwide. And it's several universities and everything all joined together.
Right.
And others can access it.
Right.
And it's getting bigger and bigger all the time.
It came in really handy during the quake. A lot of people, that's how they were communicating out to tell family and loved ones they were okay because all the phone lines were down.
I was telling Katie, and I've been
talking. But you don't need that. You don't need a phone line to operate internet.
No.
So there you go. So that was the earliest days of the internet, and people talking about it. Kitty Kirk, by the way, a brilliant journalist, and that was Gumbel right there as well. All right, let's go back to the PowerPoint real quick. So continuing on, and this was what they were talking about. You heard the producer referring to a bunch of universities having a network connected with each other. That was through what's called ARPANET, and these were various computer research labs. This is where email started. And look at this network back then. This is how it used to be. It's not nowhere near the way it is now. So you had to have specific points, and they were all networking with each other. And this is from a movie, by the way. And then you had the first personal computers, right? They used to be big and clunky. You used to have what's called floppy disk drives. They were literally floppy. You'd shake them and they'd be floppy, and that's how we transfer data, information. You had the IBM PC in 1981. Then you slowly had the Microsoft operating system, which is how the computer ran. Then Apple released the Lisa in 1983. Apple followed that up with the Macintosh in 1984, and that eventually led to what we have today in terms of computers. A very important concept, disruptive technology. A scholar named Christensen in Europe devised this concept, which is very real, and it's important. And disruptive technology is defined as a technology so different it allows a new population to access a product or service that had been in the hands of a few. Some examples include, let's say, VHS tapes, cassettes. Even before that, they were beta tapes. Eventually, we had DVDs. Eventually, we have Blu-ray discs, and now everyone just streams, right? So that's how Blu-rays got disrupted, actually. And that's how the movie industry as a whole got disrupted. Obviously, ebooks and e-commerce disrupted bookstores. We don't see nearly the amount of bookstores we used to have. iTunes, and even that's dated. I should update that because all sorts of streaming services have replaced record stores like Pandora, like SoundCloud, like Spotify. And obviously, computers disrupted the publishing industry. People actually used to use these clunky typewriters, and now everyone uses computers. And the one that's not on here, that should be on here, is social media. Social media disrupted the media industry, completely disrupted it. And the media industry is still trying to find its footing even today in terms of a steady business model and consistency. Here's a question for you. Who invented the World Wide Web? Who's responsible for actually browsing the internet and consuming all this information that's available at just the touch of a finger? The answer to this is D, Tim Berners-Lee. He is considered to be the inventor of the World Wide Web. And he's on Twitter today, if you ever want to just go say hi to him. And this is some HTML coding. This is the coding that you use to actually build websites. And this is a chart that shows all the many browsers that we have experienced through our days. Internet Explorer has been replaced with, I believe, Edge, right? But most of you are probably using either Chrome, that is the overwhelmingly most popular web browser. Mozilla Firefox, about 10% of people use that in this day and age. I personally love Firefox simply because it's open source coding. You're not giving up your privacy using it. Whereas with Google Chrome, you do have to share a lot of your information with Google. And I'm guessing a lot of you also use Safari as well, especially if you're on your phone. And this is what people used to use to connect to the internet. America Online, you'd put in a disk, you'd connect to a phone line, you'd hear a clunky modem, and it was annoying. It was slow, but that's how many of us used to get on the internet. It's really crazy. And then obviously you now have Google search engines, which has really revolutionized digital media and social media and information. And I want to quickly talk to you about Web 2.0. This is a concept that's been around for a long time now. When I first started as a scholar and especially as a media professional, there was no Web 2.0 because it used to just be the web, which was very straightforward. It was just a new way to consume information through websites. But Web 2.0 is different in that all of a sudden you have interactivity. People are communicating with each other. You can make your own content, whether it's textual, whether it's photos, whether it's videos. Really, the fundamental foundation of Web 2.0. In case you ever hear this term out there, this is mostly for academic purposes. But again, if you're watching this, you're probably in academia. Web 2.0 just applies to user-generated content. Whereas the old school way of media and even digital media was information was transferred and disseminated to the consumer, whereas now it's multifaceted. It can go back and forth. The consumer can create their own information and media. So Web 2.0 is dynamic and interactive, whereas Web 1.0 was static. I hear a lot of people utter a phrase Web 3.0. I've heard different iterations of the modern media landscape. It's not that much different, if different at all. Web 2.0 is still very applicable. You don't hear it so much in mainstream culture, but certainly in academic circles you do. Yeah, so blogs and videos, again, this is user-generated content. That's really the premise of Web 2.0 is the spread of information, right? This includes search engines, hyperlinks, which is a great way of referencing information, file sharing, social media. And this is just from Technorati. These are just some examples of popular blog websites that are out there today. And again, it's push versus pull media, whereas the mass media prefers to just push information on you. And with social media, you can be selective. And that's really a huge part of Web 2.0 as well. And it's really a luxury and affordance that social media as a whole has given individuals, is that people can be selective with the content they consume. And that was not always the case for the vast majority of the history of mass communication. You did not have a lot of options in terms of what to consume, but now you can personalize your media and decide what you want to consume. And this eventually led to, of course, what we're in now, which is the social media revolution. And this chart shows you the rapid rise of social media. It took radio 38 years to reach 50 million users. And as you go down this list, or up this list in this case, you go to Twitter, which only took 9 months to reach 50 million users. And so why are you using social networks? Why are you on social media? Well, you might be going on there to get information. This goes back to the uses and gratifications theory we covered earlier in this lecture. It might be entertainment. Maybe you're bored, maybe you're stressed and you need a getaway. Maybe you're using for communication purposes to communicate with family and friends. Maybe you want to make new connections. And maybe there's some of you out there that don't use social media. There is that crowd. They do exist. And again, social media uses and gratifications include information seeking. Maybe you need a diversion from reality. Maybe it's social motivations like connecting with others, feeling like you have a sense of community. Maybe you're trying to achieve a social status. Maybe you're trying to obtain social capital for personal and professional gain. There's a lot of reasons. So again, social networking, it's something you do usually with friends of friends. Social network is a group of people who share common connections. And the social networking site is the digital platform that lets you keep and make connections. That's it. That's your history of social media in a nutshell. I hope that was enlightening. And again, if you're watching this and you're in one of my classes, please do proceed to your discussion post and answer some questions for me. And otherwise, thank you. Take care.